Welcome back, guys. I'm Nick with History Explained. Today we're going to be talking about the start of the war in the Pacific. Let's get right into it. So in 1939, the United States had renounced its trade treaty with Japan, and beginning with an aviation gasoline ban in July of 1940, Japan became subjected to increasing economic pressure. During this time, Japan launched its first attack against Changsha, a strategically important Chinese city, but was repulsed by late September. Despite several offensives by both sides, the war between China and Japan was stalemated by 1940. To increase pressure on China by blocking supply routes, and to better position Japanese forces in the event of a war with the Western powers, Japan invaded and occupied northern Indochina, modern Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos. Afterwards, the United States embargoed iron, steel, and mechanical parts against Japan. Meanwhile, Chinese nationalist forces launched a large-scale counter-offensive in early 1940. In August, Chinese communists launched an offensive in central China. In retaliation, Japan instituted harsh measures in occupied areas to reduce human and material resources for the communists. Continued antipathy between Chinese communists and nationalist forces culminated in armed clashes in January of 1940, effectively ending their cooperation. In March, the Japanese 11th Army attacked the headquarters of the Chinese 19th Army, but was repulsed during the Battle of Shanggao. In September 1941, Japan attempted to take the city of Changsha again and clashed with Chinese nationalist forces. Meanwhile, German successes in Europe encouraged Japan to increase pressure on European governments in Southeast Asia. The Dutch government agreed to provide Japan with some oil supplies from the Dutch East Indies. The negotiations for additional access to their resources ended in failure in June of 1941. In July of 1941, Japan sent troops to southern Indochina, thus threatening British and Dutch possessions in the Far East. The United States, United Kingdom, and other Western governments reacted to this move with the freeze on Japanese assets and a total oil embargo. At the same time, Japan was planning on an invasion of the Soviet Far East, intending to capitalize off the German invasion in the West, but abandoned the operation after the sanctions. Since early 1941, the United States and Japan had been engaged in negotiations in an attempt to improve their strained relations and end the war in China. During these negotiations, Japan advanced a number of proposals which were dismissed by the Americans as inadequate. At the same time, the United States, the United Kingdom, and the Netherlands engaged in a secret discussion for the joint defense of their territories in the event of a Japanese attack against any of them. Roosevelt reinforced the Philippines and warned Japan that the United States would react to Japanese attacks against any neighboring countries. Frustrated at the lack of progress and feeling the pinch of American, British, Dutch sanctions, Japan prepared for war. On November 20th, 1941, a new government under Hideki Tojo presented an interim proposal as its final offer. It called for the end of American aid to China and for the Allies to lift the embargo on the supply of oil and other resources to Japan. In exchange, Japan promised to not launch any attacks in Southeast Asia and to withdraw its forces from southern Indochina. The American counterproposal on November 26th required that Japan evacuate all of China without conditions and conclude non-aggression pacts with all Pacific powers. This meant Japan was essentially forced to choose between abandoning its ambitions in China or seizing the natural resources it needed in the Dutch East Indies by force. Japan planned to rapidly seize European colonies in Asia to create a large defensive perimeter stretching into the Central Pacific. The Japanese would then be free to exploit the resources of Southeast Asia while exhausting the overstretched Allies by fighting a defensive war. To prevent American intervention, oh crap, I forgot where I was. Intervention while securing the perimeter, it was further planned to neutralize the United States Pacific Fleet and the American military presence in the Philippines from the outset. On December 7, 1941, Japan attacked British and American holdings from the outset. Japan attacked British and American holdings with near simultaneous offensives against Southeast Asia and the Central Pacific. These included an attack on the American fleets at Pearl Harbor and in the Philippines, landings in Thailand and Burma, and the Battle of Hong Kong. These attacks on the United States, United Kingdom, China, Australia, and several other states to formally declare war on Japan. Germany, followed by other Axis states, declared war on the United States in solidarity with Japan, citing as justification the Americas' attacks on German war vessels that had been ordered by Roosevelt. And with that, I'm sorry for the swearing at the end. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.